Hello and welcome to my channel, Christina's Cleaning and Homemaking. I'm Christina. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd appreciate it if you did that. And if you're already subscribed, hey, welcome back. So I did a book review, I think it was last week, on the Ignatius Study Bible. I absolutely love it. It's like next to the Dewey Rhymes, it's my all-time favorite Bible, and it's my favorite study Bible because of the comments in it, the commentary, and just a lot of the stuff that he has in there. It has really good content in it. And so I thought I would follow up that book review with another one. This one is on a book by Dr. Taylor Marshall called Infiltration. And as you can see here, it's loaded with information. I'm generally not one to highlight my books, so I took these tabs, and every time I found a paragraph that I thought was really significant, it had something that I wanted to share or just wanted to be able to go back and make a reference to and take note of, I put little tabs on it, and some of them I actually color-coded because they were similar events or similar things that happened. So I wanted to be able to look back and know where those similar events were. And I mean, this book is seriously loaded with information. Towards the beginning, some stuff that I already knew, like about Fatima and such, but there's a lot in here. Okay, there's a lot in here that the average Catholic probably doesn't know, and even a Catholic that usually tries to kind of educate them on a lot of the history of the church and what's been going on for like the last 50 or 60 years or so, may or may not know some of the stuff that's in here. I mean, I have a few friends that have an idea or know of some of the people that are mentioned in the book, but I mean, Dr. Taylor Marshall is thorough. If nothing else, this book is thorough, and it's fantastic for that, and it's easy to read. I actually did have a friend of mine ask about it when I was recommending it to her, if it was easy to read. Oh yes, it's very easy to read, and it has a flow to it. And so it's like, once you really get into it, you're gonna have a hard time putting it down. I think with pausing here and there, taking care of a household and a toddler, this book probably took me about 3 days. So between, cleaning, taking care of the kids, that sort of thing, it took me about 3 days to get through this. A person who doesn't have those sort of things interfering, they're gonna cruise right through it. But on the back, he even does a rundown of things that you'll learn from the book. But I mean, even that really doesn't, that's the whole point of it. It doesn't quite give you the whole core of what's in there. And that's sort of the point, because you're not going to want to give it all away on the back cover. And just when I got into it, it was a phenomenal read. The way he presents the stuff, in a way, it kind of reminds me of how when you'll be reading, say, a fiction novel, and something's revealed or the next thing that comes up, and you're like either excited or you're like, oh no. It's that kind of feeling reading this, except for as you're reading it, it's real, and it did happen. This is part of our church's history. It's a not so distant history for some of it. So of the things I wanted to go over from this book are, he covers from Pope Leo the 13th through today with Pope Francis. And he talks about how there was these conservative popes, going from Leo the 13th, we had Pius the 10th, Pius the 11th, Pius the 12th. And that's where things start to get a little bit shaky, because Pius the 12th was a conservative pope. About halfway through his papacy, things started going kind of haywire. He got this really bad stomach ailment, and he went from being this pope who loved the tradition, he loved the liturgy, he loved the sort of, I wouldn't say the pomp of it, but just sort of the celebratory nature of it. And he really got into it. And then he got this stomach ailment, and suddenly he didn't even seem to want to do Mass. If he did, he wanted to keep it short. And he really just wasn't as into it. Another thing is he also had 3 influencers. He had dropped his original confessor and went with this fellow named, I think it's B. It's B-E-A is how his name is spelled. Another one, another of the 3 people that he had close to him is like, his advisors. Not sure if I'll pronounce their names right, but I'll give it a shot. Bugnini and Montini. Now, Bugnini, I didn't know until I read this book, but he's the one who changed the liturgy from the traditional Latin Mass, also known as the extraordinary form, to the Novus Ordo Mass. He was actually pulled in first by Paul VI, I believe it was, to reform, to make some changes to the Holy Saturday Mass from the Easter Holy Week. And boy, did he make changes, and not in a good way. And then there's Montini, who also happened to have been friends with Saul Alinsky, which, if you know anything about him, he was not a good guy. He was a socialist. I wouldn't say he's an atheist because he did believe in God, but he cheered on Lucifer. In fact, the book that he wrote, I think it was Rules for Radicals, and I think that's the name of the book. And I think that's the one that he actually dedicated it to Lucifer. Who does that? Unless you're a bad guy. But yeah, so Montini was friends with Saul Alinsky, which, if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. I watched it on EWTN. It's called A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. And it's a documentary about Saul Alinsky, and has a lot of interviews and information from Father Mitch Pacwa in there, because he was involved in a lot of the Catholic side of this firsthand, and he gave some really good information in it. But it will expand more for you on who Saul Alinsky was and what he did. Not a good guy, not good stuff. But anyway, so that's Montini. So I've covered Bugnini, Montini, and B. Those were the three friends, the consults, the advisors to Pius XII. And that was during the second half of his pontificate, when things started going downhill, and he started going from being this conservative, real good pope to just really questionable things happening that you're like, this isn't good. And so he goes through the next two papal elections. And so naturally it goes from Pius XII, and the things that I noted are, like, for instance, Pope John the 23rd, he opened the third secret from Fatima a year early, and he wasn't supposed to do this, and it was right on the seal of the envelope. And then once he did open it, he read it and said, oh, well, it didn't matter, it didn't apply to his papacy, and he pretty much just shrugged it off. And he even called the Fatima seers basically doomsdayers. And it's like, no, just because someone tells the truth and warns you about something doesn't make him a doomsdayer. And it was just something very disturbing about how he just sort of blew that off. So as things go along and I'm reading Infiltration, I come to the part where there's the election after John the 23rd dies. And so it says who's elected, and it was Montini. So remembering from a few chapters back when I read about who Montini was and who he was friends with, it's that moment of, oh. And then I read what name he took. Paul VI. And that was just one of those moments where I just cringed. Because I know it's history and I know it's facts, and this isn't fiction. It actually happened. And after having read who Montini was, it was very disturbing to come across that. So we went from having popes that were really on the conservative side to progressively more and more liberal and modernist. In fact, Bugnini, Montini, and Bey were all crypto-modernists. And so that was really disturbing. And things that happened under Paul VI, well, he reopened Vatican II. And in fact, there was a document issued from Vatican II regarding the church's relationship to non-Christian religions. And that was drafted by a Father Gregory Baum under the supervision of Cardinal B. So remember Cardinal B, he was one of the advisors to Pius XII. Well, he was the supervisor of Father Gregory Baum, who was the one who drafted this paperwork regarding the relationship between the Catholic Church and other non-Christian religions. Well, he's suspect because he eventually left the priesthood, married a woman, but was openly gay and an LGBT activist. So basically, the documents relating to our church's relationship with non-Christian religions was written up by someone who wasn't even faithful to the church. And it's not like this was a sudden overnight type of thing. Those sorts of things are kind of ongoing. It's just a matter of time before, the true colors are shown and the truth is revealed. In the book, I'd say pages 150 through 151, those are the changes that are made by Pope Paul VI, and they're not good. So when you get the book, I do recommend definitely paying close attention to that. Other things that I noticed in the book, which, like I said, I tabbed. One tab just popped off. I'll have to find that again. But Humana Vitae wasn't the first document of its kind. In fact, there was Humana Vitae, then there was also a document by, I believe, John the 23rd, but they all had the same theme into it. So I mean, this whole thing of the ban on contraception being used in general, but especially in the Catholic Church, being sinful and not okay. I mean, we have 3 different documents that say that. And Paul VI being, when I read about who he was, that was pretty hardcore. Him writing Humana Vitae and condemning the use of contraception and all the things that he predicted would happen if contraception was used have come to pass. So the Holy Spirit was moving in that. I mean, think about it. In this book, you'll read about it. 3 different popes, three different popes, all on a spectrum from conservative to not conservative, like liberal type popes. They all wrote the same things in documents regarding contraception in the church, that it's not okay and it's forbidden, it's a grave sin. So I thought that was really interesting, that it was 3 different popes, all different levels of conservativeness, if you will. Another thing I noticed that in the book, there was this list of bishops turned cardinals as time went on that were considered sort of they were considered conservative, but not as conservative. And on that list is Benedict. But as things progressed along, I noticed that he seemed to move more and more conservative and away from that group, which was kind of cool and interesting. Seeing him, that he'd start out in this one group with like von Balthasar, which, my opinion, anyone who says that that hell's empty and that pretty much everyone's going to be saved didn't pay good enough attention to the scripture and isn't that isn't conservative. It just isn't. But yeah, so in reading this, it's just, another point that was made in here, the traditional Latin Mass was never abrogated. There was something, I believe it's called the Agatha Christie Edict, and that was signed off on by Pope Paul VI, that allowed the traditional Latin Mass, and then Benedict even came out later and said it was never abrogated to begin with. So the traditional Latin Mass was always allowed, and there was even an edict to protect it, but like Pope Benedict said, it was never abrogated to begin with. So it was never stopped. There was just always the traditional Latin Mass and the Novus Ordo. And I've got to say, there is so much information in this book. I do highly recommend it. I know in doing this review, there's probably something that I missed in it that I wanted to mention. In fact, before I end this video, I'm trying to think of anything that there was to mention that I missed. But, oh yeah, Bugnini, the one who changed the liturgy. Under John Paul II, he was at some sort of Vatican meeting, left his briefcase accidentally at the meeting. So another, I think it was a bishop that was there, possibly a cardinal, but I think it was a bishop, saw his briefcase, opened it up to try and find out who this briefcase that got left behind belonged to. It belonged to Bugnini. Inside of it was Freemason paperwork identifying him as a Freemason. Bugnini, the man who changed the Holy Saturday liturgy, who gave us the Novus Ordo Mass, was a Freemason, and he'd been one for quite some time. And this was the man who was an advisor to Pius XII, did the Novus Ordo, like I said, changed the Holy Saturday Mass. And when it was discovered instead of being excommunicated like Freemasons are supposed to, he was basically sent what would be considered a demotion and exile to be a pronuncio in Iran, which I thought that was kind of shady, really. I mean, he should have got the boot altogether. He was a Freemason, and that is not compatible with Catholicism. But yeah, that was the last point that I wanted to make, that's coming to mind right now at least, about this book. Like I said, I highly recommend it. As you can see, just there was a lot of points, and I tried to tab everything that I thought was really profound, and I wanted to share that with you. So I hope this gives you a good rundown of what's in the book and motivation to go and get it yourself if you haven't read it yet. And if you have read it already, please share in the comments what you thought of it, if you were as impressed as I was with it. And also, one of the other people that Taylor Marshall mentions in this book is Bella Dodd. She was a communist, and not only does he talk about the Freemasons, but he also talks about the communists and how they infiltrated the church. And he pulls in a quote or two from her. So naturally I had to go get her book because I wanted to know, you know, from her standpoint, what all happened. And her book just expands so much on what's in this book that it's not even funny. So, but it's not as quick of a read. It's well written, but not as quick of a read as this. I will be doing a book review on that one as soon as I get done with it. I'm still in progress on that one. I've been spending off and on this week reading it as much as possible, and I didn't get to read any in it yesterday because I was just too busy. But definitely recommend this. I'm sure I'll be recommending the Bella Dodd book, School of Darkness, soon too, but these definitely are books I'd highly recommend that you get, loaded with information, very helpful, and it will teach you a lot about church history and the politics that we don't normally see, more so than you'd ever think. So thank you for watching this video. Again, if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd certainly appreciate it if you could subscribe, and if you click the little bell, YouTube will send you notifications every time I have a new video up. And if you could, please like this video. And like I said, leave comments down below if you've read it and what you thought of it and what you learned from it. And thanks, and I will see you in the next video.